Good morning. Thank you for joining us for an inspiring conversation about raising children in the age of AI. My name is Samantha Barbosa-Silva, and I am your moderator this morning. I'm a Laurier alumna and currently completing my PhD in developmental psychology. As we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that Laurier's Kitchener, Waterloo, Brantford, and Milton campuses are close to 18 First Nations communities and 12 Métis councils. The Six Nations of the Grand River and Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations are only a 15-minute drive from our Brantford campus. The Waterloo campus is located on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Neutral peoples. Perhaps you're joining us from another location, and in that case, I would encourage you to take a moment to honor the Indigenous peoples who have lived and worked where you reside historically and presently. Acknowledging them reminds us of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work. We recognize, honor, and respect these nations as the traditional stewards of the land and water. We will begin our event with a panel discussion before opening a conversation to the audience. Feel free to pop your questions into the Q&A box as we go, and I'll pose them to our panelists later. Now I will introduce those panelists, which is Keri Ewart and Somayeh Fatahi. Dr. Keri Ewart is co-chair of the Bachelor of Education program and assistant professor in language and literacy at Laurier. Her research centers on culturally responsive and sustaining pedagogy, critical literacy, and rapidly growing field of AI in education. With extensive K-12 teaching experience and leadership in curriculum development and modern learning, Dr. Ewart collaborates with universities, school districts, and ministries worldwide to meaningfully and ethically integrate AI literacy and fluency into education. Dr. Somayeh Fatahi is an assistant professor at Laurier, specializing in artificial intelligence and machine learning. With over 10 years of teaching experience, her research focuses on human-centered AI, large language models, user modeling, and data analytics in education, business, and health. Thank you both for sharing your time with us this morning. To start us off, I think it would be very useful for us to actually clarify a simple question. So what exactly is artificial intelligence? We hear all sorts of technologies lumped in under that term, but AI is so much more than just ChatGPT. Before we dive into our discussion, Dr. Ewart has graciously agreed to give us a very quick overview of AI and what we mean when we're referring to various aspects of it today. Keri, over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to share my screen quickly. There's a few slides here. So before we get into it, I really want to press the idea that AI has been around for a long time. It actually was started in 1956, but I want you to look at these questions here and think to yourself, have you ever used Siri? Hey Siri, Alexa, hey Google. Have you ever had spam filters in your inbox that you have, or used Face ID, or used your thumbprint, or used a Roomba to clean your house, or watch Netflix and had suggestions? All of this is AI. And so, as we kind of go through a little bit of a synopsis of what AI is, I want you to think, hold on a second, maybe I've been using it more than I've ever thought. Okay. And this, I'm not going to play it, but Jerry Seinfeld has a really funny rendition of what AI is. So, looking at, there's two types of AI, generative AI right now, and agentic AI, and we'll get into both very, very briefly. But you might have heard of ChatGPT or Perplexity or looking at Claude or might have used it. So, really, AI or generative AI is a type of artificial intelligence that can actually create and write and design. People who are not coders, which is myself, I can actually code using AI, using generative AI. So we use different types of specialized tools to help us in that way. And so you might have heard a lot about a large language model. And so often we think, okay, this is terminology that we don't know. But in essence, a large language model of AI is just designed to understand or process or to generate human-like text. So it scrapes from the entire internet, reads tons and tons of data, and then comes up with a rendition of a guessing game almost of what they believe. And when I say they, I mean generative AI. In predicting types of language so that it can predict the words or the ideas that come next. So it's like having that friend that you're doing the storytelling, and that friend is responding to you and trying to guess what you're going to say next and fills in the blanks of your story. That's like your own generative AI in your own life. So, looking at, we talk about garbage in, garbage out, and looking at that natural language prompt that comes from you. So when you're using a generative AI, you are the prompt. And the better your prompt, the more accurate, the more culturally responsive, the more detailed it contextualize, the better the output. And the human has the ability to provide that feedback. So really quickly, there's two types of generative AI. The first is called auto-regressive language modeling. And in terms of this, the very easy way of saying it is if you've ever played that game where everybody does a word or an idea to a story and then the story is made up, that's exactly what AI is doing. It's guessing that next word. And you might be familiar with that if you're typing something in and it guesses the spelling or what word you're trying to do. That's exactly what this auto-regressive model is doing. So that's it. And then after that, there is what's called a reinforcement learning from human feedback. And that's where you are either saying, if ChatGPT, for instance, you write something in and it gives you an answer and it asks you, is this kind of what you're looking for? That thumbs up. You are then training that generative AI to produce that type of response. So it learns what you're looking for and it's able to guess even better. So ultimately, at the very end of this all, we look at two types. So that's generative AI. And generative AI is basically a content creator. It's a designer where you are asking the question of it, and that is producing texts or images or slides or code or whatever. And then agentic AI does all that, but also it creates a response, but also it takes action. It completes tasks. It's almost like your own, I guess, digital assistant, if you may. And so it checks calendars and it goes and scans and searches more information. And so that's where it becomes a little bit smarter. But like you'll be hearing today, it's not actually smart. It's just gathering information from what has been given to it. So, and the key thing is that garbage in, if you're producing garbage in, it's going to give you that garbage out. So there's my little rendition of what AI is.
Thank you, Keri. That was very informative. So now that we know the basics of AI, let's cover some topics that will hopefully be helpful to you as parents. So we'll start with our first question here, which is some parents are concerned that generative AI will become a crutch for children, preventing them from learning vital skills like critical thinking. So how can kids use AI to be creative and enhance their thinking? And we'll start with Somayeh for this one.
Hello, everyone. Actually, first of all, thanks for inviting me for this webinar. As a mother, actually, I can understand patterns concern about, okay, how technology and AI maybe affect children's skills. You can imagine two students, for example, student number one type only one question into AI and get the answer and copy the answer and, stops there. So, for another student, actually, it can read the AI answer clearly, carefully, and ask AI again, okay, is this complete? Or could you please add some examples for me? Or actually say, okay, can you explain more? Or ask for opposite viewpoint, So we have two different kinds of students here. So the research actually shows that the learning becomes deeper when a student analyze and evaluate information, instead of just only they want to copy it. So AI can be like, thinking calculator, So the calculator actually did not destroy math. So it helps a student focus on more complex problem solving. So AI can actually help critical thinking if parents help students, teachers help students to use AI for children as a brainstorming tool, as a writing improvement assistant or as a source for comparing different perspectives. So it can actually increase analytic and creative skills, but it depends on us how we want to teach our children, how they want to actually use it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your response. Keri, would you like to add anything?
Sure. I love that you use the two students as examples. And I think if you look at, so I was K to 12 teacher, taught and BEd, masters, so on and so forth. And I have two lovely, very interesting teenagers right now. So I'm in the thick of it. And I think what it comes down to is we have to naturally teach students how to think critically and how to think creatively. It doesn't just come naturally. So if you're teaching a student to question critically, then you're also teaching them to respond critically, and things don't change with AI. There's something called outsourcing, where you outsource all of that cognitive load to the AI, and that's when the AI thinks for you. And that is never good because it takes away the agency that you have, it takes away the thinking and the capacity. But if you're teaching students or teaching our children how to think critically, how to question critically, how to what we call micro prompts, so you're prompting the AI, that actually takes a lot of cognitive load. It takes a lot of critical thinking to prompt an AI in a way that really allows for that response. So really what you're thinking about it is not as an outsourcing, it's being like a critical companion or a critical tool that you're working with, like that friend that you're asking ideas to. And so that's called the offloading. You're offloading that the easy tasks, for instance, to the AI, that efficiency piece, but then you're taking on that really critical idea behind it. But the thing is, I think that what we need to talk about is how guardrails are essential. So how we're thinking of it being the co-pilot, not the pilot of the plane, and recognizing that AI is biased because the people who are designing the AI, they do also have biases and limitations and stereotypes and things like that. So the way that we're prompting our AI and what we're looking at our AI to do for us, we have to naturally think and look at it from a critical lens. You have to look at it from multiple perspectives. You can't just take the first glance what AI produces for you. You can use it for brainstorming maybe, but I always teach my students the three cores of practicing with AI, and that is check, compare, and contextualize. So if you're teaching that explicit verification, assessing, is it credible? Is it just like we would with websites, right? Is the author an expert? Is the publication, do they have citations? Is this really valid information? And examine the evidence. And then look for the corroboration from other sources, then that would be that piece. The second is encouraging that cross-section, that cross-checking, right? Comparing those multiple outlets. That is this the only source of information? Because right now we're worried that a lot of the information online is not just people generated, it's now AI generated. So now you're taking all of that information from both ourselves, what we've produced, plus with AI, and it's so hard to detect. And then that final piece is being a skeptic. And I do a ton of research in AI in education, and I am still very much a skeptic. But without that cynicism, looking at asking questions like, what was the author's purpose? What information is missing? Who's missing from the story? What biases are being presented? And so if we're looking at it from that triangulation of those three parts, I think we're teaching our children and our students to be more critical in understanding and really navigating AI.
Great response, Keri. And I think that leads very well into our second question here, which is, as misinformation runs rampant online, how can we teach our children to identify fact from fiction? And I'd like to start answering this question just by saying that one really easy way to begin teaching children about misinformation and fact checking is to have conversations with them about what we see online. So children learn quite well from individuals that they trust, especially adults that they trust. So if you, as a parent or guardian or an older sibling, for example, are questioning what you see, whether it's on a website or a social media post or from a news outlet, children will start to pick up on these habits as well. So it's as simple sometimes as just discussing where the information was found. You know, does your child think that the information is true? Do they need to do a little bit more searching? Is it similar to information that they might already know, right? So just having them do those kind of stop and think is what we like to call it in our lab. Have them stop, have them process that information a little bit more, and have them think about that information so they're not just being passive searchers or passive learners, right? We've all seen children hop on Google or whatever search engine or ChatGPT now, which is being used a lot, and they pop in and they say like, you know, what do zebras like to eat? And ChatGPT spits something out at you, or Google gives you a top result, which is oftentimes paid by those individuals to be a top result. And they're very quick to click the very first answer or assume that that answer is correct, right? So as the adult in their life, or as the guardian or parent or whatever it might be, if you're stopping and thinking and processing and having these conversations, your children will start to do that as well. And then we see that as children get older, they will get better at these skills. Obviously, not everybody is the best at them. Adults also struggle with these kinds of things. But over time, then you can start to incorporate looking at things like cues that tell us about credibility and reliability and trustworthiness. So this is a little bit more of a deeper dive, looking at authors, looking at dates. When was this published? Is somebody paying for this information? Do they have other links? Are those links suitable for the information that you're taking in? And those kinds of things. And as I said, we can help them kind of along the way as they develop these skills, especially given the current online environment and how information is being generated and we're not always sure where it's coming from. So that very first step of kind of teaching our children and having those conversations is a good way to start getting them into the process of understanding online information. And I'll move over to Keri now so she can give us some input.
Thank you. And I saw Dawn in the saying that you don't have kids, but concerned about how AI affects education. I'm right there with you. I do have kids, but I still am very concerned as well. And I think that Samantha, you did a great job at kind of articulating ways that we could go about really looking and what we're doing in the field of education. And there's this fantastic article. It's called How Generative AI Fixes What Higher Education Broke. I know it's pushing the envelope here, reframing the colonization of knowing and learning, and maybe we can share it afterwards. But it does a really good job at saying, hold on a second, are we keeping up to the way that society is being molded, this digital age, or are we still preparing our students for what was? And if you think of every single phase and generation, it was the calculators. And the calculators, I remember seeing picket lines, of people saying absolutely no calculators being used in the class because it's a form of cheating. And then you had the computers and the iPads coming into class. And then now with generative AI and social media and everything. So these are all tipping points that are impacting education. And am I okay to share my screen one more time? I have an example for this that I think would respond really nicely to it. And that's the idea. I want to think about images and something that Samantha talked about. I'm just going to show you a picture of, and I do it with my dogs and my animals. These are the joys. Sorry, I'm just going to get into sharing the bigger screen. Let me go through this quickly. I apologize. So these are my pets. This is the joys of having teenagers. I'm not a cat person, but cats have come into my house because of my daughter. So this was a picture that we took at Christmas, and my daughter put this picture into AI and had some fun with it, but you already see the cautions of images. So I want you to keep an eye on the cat on your right-hand side of your screen. Okay, that's Denver. Look how big Denver is now in the picture. Okay, and then we think, okay, it would be really cool to have it in front of our Christmas tree, and then bring them closer, and then finally, very, very cute image. But now, what if this is a student, or this is your child, or this is you? And now your information, your picture is out there online. Already we're posting on social media. You think of scammers, you think of deep fakes, you think of now voice, you have a video out there. People can pair through the use of AI. They can actually pair all of this together. So really thinking critically, number one, about your digital footprint and what you're sharing and how you're sharing it and the parameters that you're using. But number two, what you're sharing about your nieces, your nephews, you think, oh, I'm keeping this in my own personal archive and everything, but how it's now being used and generated with AI and what is the purpose of that? Okay, so that's sort of my little thinking behind this, and really thinking about how we're using it in both constructive ways, meaningful ways, but very ethical ways for ourselves. And I think that's all I'll say about this topic.
Absolutely. Just for the sake of time, we'll move on to the next question and we'll start with Somayeh this time. So kids are spending more and more time online, and research suggests that excessive screen time and social media use can have negative effects on their health and well-being. So what should parents be aware of when it comes to these topics?
Okay. Actually, I guess first parents should ask themselves, okay, is my children are a creator or just a consumer, you know? They can use AI or technology things, you know, and as an active use or passive use, you know. For example, for AI tools, they can use it for designing a game, you know, learning coding or creating educational video, you know, or maybe writing a story with AI. So it's very great idea if they can use it as a creative and active use, you know. But if they only go, for example, to Instagram and endless scrolling, you know, and or maybe comparing themselves, for example, with others in social media, you know, so it the research actually show us the passive use, especially heavily, for example, social media or maybe AI, actually it associated with higher level of anxiety, you know. So actually the quality of a screen matters more than the number of hours you know we are working with AI or maybe technology thing. So I guess it's the best question is okay, instead of we ask ourselves, okay, how many hours it's better, okay, which kind of use or children actually or they are active or passive, you know. So if it helps them to increase their some skills such as, you know, problem solving or critical thinking, so we can say, okay, that's fine. And it helps them as, for example, educate as an educational tool.
I agree. I find that, parents, guardians, whoever it may be, become quite worried about how much time their children are spending online. And it's more so about what they're doing online instead of how much time they're spending. Obviously, we don't want children to be online for an excessive amount of time per day, but the reality is that a lot of educational and academic things are now being completed in an online format, whether that's homework, whether it's doing art activities, whatever it might be, looking up information, fact checking. So the idea here is that you monitor their amount of screen time, but you're also monitoring what they're doing. And I think Samaya made some really good points there about the fact that a lot of online technology and a lot of online use can be quite helpful. It can be creative. It can be very enhancing to these children. There's a lot of apps that have been created that kind of surpass just being like a game for children. And allow them to, work on math skills or English skills or writing skills or reading skills, whatever it might be. So just keeping in mind that it's less so about the amount of screen time and more so, are you sitting there with your child and interacting with the things that they're interacting with? Are you talking about what they're seeing? Are you singing songs? Are you playing games? Are you reading with them in an e-format? All of those things kind of play a role in whether it's going to be a more negative experience or if it'll be more positive in the long term. Keri, do you have anything to add?
I think just being aware of children's mental health, right? They know that exposure and exactly what it is, non-purposeful or doom scrolling or looking at AI and seeing how that's impacting them. I know that 2024, I believe, the Public Health Agency of Canada Journal, they said that from 13 to 17, that students or children have increased their social media use really by 95% since 2 years prior, which is astronomical to me. It's mind-blowing. And so looking at especially screen time at night before children go to bed or once their parents have gone to bed, that I know in our house still to this day, mind you, with my 18 turning 19-year-old, I can't do this much anymore, but we've had no phones in rooms. And that was a way that we've disconnected. But a lot of times you're seeing increased anxiety, depression, and it is all linked to both social media, but now so much of AI is being influenced by a lot of this, and it's kind of streaming into these settings. And so I think just making sure that there's consistency, that there's clear expectations. It's inevitable students are and children are on their devices, especially for academic purposes. So just making sure that it's streamlined for those purposes. That's all I would add to that.
Awesome. All right, and then now is our last question before we jump into kind of the Q&A from our audience. And again, we'll start with Somayeh for this one. So now that kids are hearing ominous predictions about AI eliminating jobs, how can we prepare them for a workforce in an AI future?
Actually, I love this question, because these days it's not only parents, but many people actually are worried about the AI maybe replace them. As I'm not exception, Sometimes I think, oh my God, I mean, I expert by, I guess maybe AI replace me, and actually, if we look at the AI, we can see AI can do some, routine tasks such as maybe translate simple text, or write basic reports, or maybe generate basic codes. For example, as a computer science expert, I know, for example, sometimes when you ask ChatGPT for create code, you can see there are many mistakes behind that. So AI cannot do everything. For example, it cannot do truly empathize with the patient, or maybe handle complex human negotiations, or make ethical decisions with moral responsibility, or for example, lead and inspire a team. So you can see there are some limitations for that, because it only works based on training the data, and as Keri mentioned, the garbage in and garbage out. So it can only, for example, ChatGPT only read a lot of articles and texts and internet, and based on that can predict something. They cannot think as human think. According to the World Economic Forum, actually, the most important future skills are not, a routine technical tasks, but high-level human abilities. So, key feature skills like analytical thinking, complex problem solving, creativity, emotional intelligence, adaptability. So we need some these kind of skills, and maybe some jobs will change or disappear as when internet came, and technology came, but human-centered skills are becoming more valuable. Actually, in the future, I guess our goal is not, compete with AI. Our goal is collaborate with AI effectively. So it's better children and teachers actually try to learn children how to work with AI. How to ask clear and strong questions, how to evaluate AI generated answers, and how they can improve and the AI skills. And I guess actually the future belongs to people who can actually combine human intelligence with artificial intelligence. So I guess we don't need to be so worried about maybe AI replace us.
Keri, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
That was a great answer. I think you're bang on where you say that it's human and artificial, and what that artificial intelligence will look like. We're moving to a super intelligence where that's going. I think the biggest piece is being adaptable and flexible with your thinking. We don't know what the world is going to look like 2 years from now, let alone 5, 10 years from now. And jobs. And they say there's a number out there, like 65% of jobs that are in effect right now will not be there 5 years from now. So really teaching those critical thinking, the creativity, creative skills, foundational literacy skills, AI literacy and fluency skills. I think really effective communication skills and collaboration, all of those, they call them the 6 C's type thing, as well as thinking about one's own thinking, understanding their learning and how they're learning and what they're doing and how to solve problems in really critical and creative ways. So we might not know what these jobs might look like. Will I be able to have a job as a professor? I don't think so, because you need that human-centered, exactly what Somayeh talked about, that human-centered approach. But really building those foundational skills now in students and children and even in ourselves, and keeping with those skills, you'll see right now there's a massive increase for need in different types of plumbers and electricians and those vocational skills. And so, but people, again, paired with technology, things are looking so different. So just creating those foundational skills. We're not going to be out of jobs, but you need to be able to work alongside as a companion with AI.
I agree. I find that similar to what Keri was saying earlier in our webinar talk about, people were worried about the calculator and it was the radio and the TV. I think that because AI has just been made out to be this super scary thing that people don't really have like a deep grasp on because it's just popping up everywhere and you're trying to keep up with all of the things that are showing up on the internet for you, showing up on your smartphone every time you get an update or on your computer, your laptop, or whatever it might be. So the idea here is that instead of painting AI so negatively, is telling your children that even though AI is going to be integrated, that's just the way that we're moving. A lot of positives are going to come out of that. Think of all the jobs that'll be generated when AI is needed. All of those individuals who will have to know how to use AI, how to integrate AI, teaching other individuals how to use it. It won't just be the education sector. It's already being used in factories. It's being used, like you said, in the trades. AI is also being used now. Lots of tools and things like that are being updated to have these kind of AI functions. And again, moving away from that idea that everything is just ChatGPT, everything is just that generative kind of AI where you pop something in and it spits something out at you. It's a lot more complex than that. But if we're able to provide our children with the skills, if we set up educational aspects in the schools, starting quite young with them, understanding computers better, understanding coding, even if it's like very low level, all of those kinds of skills will help them in the future instead of hindering them when AI starts to become quite integrated. Awesome. Thank you so much, Somayeh and Keri, for all of your responses. We're going to be moving into the Q&A portion now. So we've got quite a few questions in the chat. We'll do our best to get through most of them. The first one here is, when you use AI, does it save everything you ask of it? How do you protect everyone's privacy? Keri or Somayeh, go ahead.
I can take this on to start off with. That's a really good question. There's actual, if you go into the settings, you can turn stuff like that off. A lot of people don't know it. It's just kind of you go and it uses it for training and everything, but there are parameters in those guardrails to turn those to an extent off. A lot of it is we don't know completely. There's that ambiguity of what is happening with our information. But you can use different tools like Google Notebook LM, for instance, that does not and very clearly states that it doesn't use your information for training purposes. So I think things like that, where you're really particular about the guardrails, you're reading your terms of service. You're looking at your cookies. So the cookies that are, you can turn them off and still have full access to that particular tool. There's third-party cookies that are not even part of that tool. So making sure that you're not agreeing to those. There's lots of things that you can do in terms of that. And then the misinformation, making sure that you are really what we had talked about, that you're fact checking, that you're cross-referencing and things like that.
Somayeh, did you want to add anything to that?
No, actually, I'm good.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. All right, so our next question here is, what children are not doing while they're online is also a concern. So if they're sitting online and not moving, they're missing their physical activity that is so necessary for physical and mental health. So how do you feel about wearable technology and games that encourage more of this movement? Somayeh, if you'd like to start.
Okay, actually, as you know, our learning is not only digital. So, yes, our children actually need important life skills growth, such as free play, reading printed books, physical activity. And actually, yes, the research show us, okay, if actually they can do unstructured play, actually it helps them to develop some functions in their brain. So, because as you know, if they work with digital tools a lot, maybe it reduce their attention span and decrease their real life social skills. So, technology actually is useful, but balance is more essential. And I guess it's our responsibility as a teachers, as a researcher, and also parents to encourage and motivate our children. And we can provide environment for them for do free play, and outdoor activities only instead only sit behind the desk and only do, for example, digital games or something like that.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add that there are quite a few games now, especially using things like VR headsets and other wearable technology, that are not just, point and shoot or point and click or whatever it might be. A lot of them actually require being cognizant, paying attention, doing puzzles, doing a little bit of higher level thinking. And then you also have that aspect when you're using VR and wearable technology where you can get up, you can move around. It helps with spatial acuity and things like that. So there's a little bit of research in that area now, especially when we're adding in things like AI and VR to our everyday lives. And children are obviously very into those kind of gamified aspects of those wearable technologies. So it is a good thing to do, but as Somayeh said, there has to be some kind of balance. Obviously, going outside, interacting with other individuals, playing games outside, even just going out and taking a break from technology has shown to help with things like mental well-being and physical well-being as well, right? So not always being stationary. It's a balance for everything. The wearable technology is great, and we love to see that they're kind of moving away from just being seated at a computer or in front of a TV. But there still has to be a balance there of having tech-free time. Yeah. Keri, did you want to add anything?
I think just so a lot of my research was in this actually at UB. I was at the University of British Columbia prior to coming to Laurier and designed and taught VR, XR, MR, so virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed realities. And the entire purpose was for non-coders to create opportunities, social justice based, for wearable technologies and being able to move and do. And what we found was in some of the research was that active living, rehabilitation, that they were improved and increased with being able to partner with a wearable technology. And I know our UX lab at Laurier at the Brantford campus right now is doing phenomenal things around using wearable technologies for rehabilitation, for movement and growth and things that could not otherwise be done without, and it's improving and increasing. So there's definitely benefits, but I am absolutely, getting students and children off screens. And, we were of the age that you left the house and did not come home until the street lights came on. So no dating myself in that respect, but at the same time that it was all about movement and everything. So there definitely needs to be a balance there.
Okay. Our next question here in the chat is, we're trying to teach our teams to self-monitor and track how much time they spend on screens to a maximum of 3 hours of quote unquote entertainment screen time per day. Do you have suggestions on improving this strategy to focus more on the quality of screen time? They don't have social media and are usually watching YouTube videos or playing video games like Minecraft. Yeah. I can start answering this. We've done a little bit of research in terms of that kind of quality versus quantity when it comes to screen time and what kids are doing online. So again, not that social media is something that's the super bad thing that children should not have. There's obviously age limits and restrictions. As Keri was mentioning before, going into those settings and looking at privacy and looking at what kind of ads are going to be generated for them and what kind of information is being shared with third-party users is really important when they're doing anything that's entertainment based online. This also includes YouTube. So there's YouTube Children's, which you can set like parental parameters. You can have your account linked so you can see exactly what's in their history and what they're looking at. You can block comments and things like that. You can block them from subscribing so they're not accidentally, coming upon something that they might not see or seeing something hateful in the comments that might not be super helpful for them or might be negatively impacting them. And then the idea that, again, quality screen time means just kind of being more cognizant of what you're actually looking at. So even things like watching YouTube videos has integrated advertisements and sponsorships, and children aren't very good at picking up on those kinds of things. A lot of research actually supports the fact that children don't notice that there's a difference between content and things like sponsorships and advertisements. And it's kind of that persuasion piece where, they might start to ask questions about these items. They might want to purchase these items. There's things like TikTok Shop now that is really big for people just buying stuff off of the internet. But again, that's not really the purpose of being on TikTok or being on YouTube. It's to watch videos, it's to gain entertainment, right? So just keeping an eye on what exactly they're looking at, even if it tends to be more catered towards, children or teens, such as Minecraft and things like that. And also being cognizant of those parasocial relationships. So that just means that they're building relationships with these individuals online that they might not ever actually meet in person, right? So just know that sometimes, their life is very influential and they have access to resources and things for free that we as regular individuals will probably never get to see. So again, just making your child aware that those things can happen online, to come and talk to you if they're having big feelings, if they're worried about any of those kinds of things. Once again, just kind of building those conversations. Keri or Somayeh, do you have anything?
Uh, I can actually back to my I mentioned about active use and passive use. I guess maybe it's a good idea if we can actually get a report from our children and ask them, okay, what you learned, when they are using, for example, YouTube or maybe AI tools, and evaluate it, and also, as you mentioned, so we can set rules, for example, maybe some rules, some parameters, we can fix it, for example, for YouTube for children, and also, as I mentioned, technology is useful, but the balance is essential, so I guess the active use, and also get the report from them, and be sure of what they learned and evaluate it. So it's a good idea and it's helpful for them.
I think the only thing that I would add, I've done this with my BEd students, my Bachelor of Education, as well as my master students, and it's looking at attention economy. And there's some fascinating research out there saying that humans have less capacity in terms of attention capacity than a goldfish. So that's less than 6 seconds. And just for ourselves and understanding, every single time you get a notification, every single time that you're spending any time or getting any notifications from social media or email or anything, it takes 28 minutes for you to get back in that sense of flow of the original activity that you were doing. And so having children track their attention on social media, on videos, on what they're doing and what they're learning, that it is really helpful for them to be cognizant, because then that's when they can make changes. So if they're just doom scrolling or just looking or watching videos for 3 hours at a time, they don't really realize where their attention's going and what's happening with that. So being able to be cognizant about where their attention is, what is taking that attention. Samantha, I love that you talked about that money trail of, influencers, of ads and things like that. It's a really cool exercise to do, especially with children and teens and things like that, because it makes them, and I did it not long ago with my teens, and they thought, oh my gosh, I'm actually spent so much time watching these reels, and I wasted it. And so things like that could be extremely helpful as well.
Thank you. All right. Our next question is, I have a child with a learning disability around writing. I'm curious if you think there are ethical ways he could use AI to support the communication of his learning without seeming like he has outsourced his work. For example, if he uses it as a writing assistant, should he submit the thread from ChatGPT or Claude with that assignment or whatever it might be?
I can actually speak to this right away because this is exactly my research that I'm doing right now. So we have a pen to prompt project that is in grade 6 classrooms. It's starting right after March break. We designed, ethically and culturally responsibly designed, an AI tool that is exactly that, a writing companion, and can make some suggestions for tools that are already out there as well. And we're looking at it both as a tool, as a companion for students to really build their critical thinking, their writing structures and everything. 100% yes, they need to reference that they've used AI, what the prompts were, what the outcome was, because it's really helpful for the teacher to be able to see where they are, because that can help them assist that student as well with accommodations, with different types of learning strategies and everything. The tool that we've designed allows the teacher to track that for every single student. So we will have data from this by June, but we're just starting it in March. But definitely different types of tools are available. Brisk AI, for instance, is available to students. It is ethically sourced, it's ethically created. Again, still with harms, still with the being aware of the bias and everything like that. But, and I love that you use the outsourcing as opposed to outloading. So being able to use it as that thinking companion along the way for brainstorming and having that critical conversation, I think it's key to help students understand how to do that effectively, but being able to use it as a writing companion, as a tool to assist and accommodate. This is exactly where we're going right now with research and trying to see how it does help and support students in that respect.
Somayeh, would you like to add anything?
No, I'm good.
I just wanted to briefly touch on, there's a difference between using AI and asking it to write something for you. So you say, I have an assignment that needs to be 2 pages long and it needs to be about giraffes and their environment. Versus having your child work on the assignment, try to get some ideas down, try to get some foundational work down, have them do the writing first, and then asking for some assistance from those AI assistants, right? So helping with things like grammar and spelling, or giving them different kind of structures that they might, or other information that they could incorporate, but not actually asking for that information from the AI, right? So it's the idea of doing the work first and then having someone check it, which is very similar to what we do when you're working with a peer or when you're in an educational setting. People will look over your spelling work, people will look over your essays and things like that. So it's the same kind of idea, but obviously now we're using a system that can pull from an abundance of information, right? But then again, you still need to double check everything that it's giving back to you, because we know that not all of it is going to be true. So, okay. And then our next question is, do you have any suggestions on how to teach children about why it is so important to be able to decipher misinformation from what is real? Somayeh, would you like to start?
Yeah, actually, our goal is not to tell children don't trust anything, Our goal should be to teach them to trust wisely. As Keri mentioned about garbage in and garbage out, about, for example, ChatGPT, it can predict which word is most likely to come next. They generate response based on statistical probability. So the research actually show the best approach is teaching children how they can check information, not just telling them, okay, what is true or false. So how we can actually teach them? We can actually learn them, okay, when you get an information, not only from, for example, AI tools, before that, for example, internet, okay, what is the resource and who write this one? And is there any evidence for that? And can you check, for example, a scientific website for that, so it can actually help they can become thinkers, not just as a consumers. So I guess it's better we try to teach them, check the information, and also these days we are working on a research how much we can trust information and when we get it from AI, and there are many research because when you are working with AI and, for example, ChatGPT, you can see when you ask it some questions, sometimes they give you wrong answers. We can show as an example to our children, okay, you can see always it's not true. There is a mistake behind that. So when they can see, they will actually sure, oh, okay, so I cannot ask everything from it, and I have to check, For example, when you ask them, okay, give me some links, or for example, for research paper, when you check it, you can see there isn't anything, For example, for citation, you can say, oh, there isn't anything they mentioned. So it's better we show them always it's not true, and actually it helps them to improve their critical thinking, and they also search skills.
Yeah, one easy way in our lab that we like to describe why, it's so important to kind of understand misinformation, especially when we're explaining it to younger children. We like to tell them that it's kind of like the game of telephone, right? So you start with one message, maybe you saw a post on social media, maybe you saw a news post, maybe you saw something on a website. You take in that information and then you share it with somebody else. Now, that person might not remember every detail. They might not remember where you got that information from. They might add things in because they feel like it might be kind of right. And then they pass it on to the next person and the next person. And especially in the online format where it's so easy to like and share and repost and share things with family and friends and put it on your story, misinformation gets spread very quickly, especially when it comes to things like health or world politics or things going on in your community. And it can get really scary really fast, right? So we like to say like it's easier to explain it to your children as if it's like the game of telephone, right? You want to make sure that that initial message was true and reliable and correct, which means you need to check it first before you share it with anybody else. And then that way you can ensure that any information you're going to share is hopefully going to be shared in its true and credible and correct format, right? Keri, would you have anything to add to that?
Samantha, I love that idea of the telephone. It reminds me, I think it was like the late 90s, early 2000s, when the Concerned Children's advertisers, they created that House Hippo PSA advertisement. I don't know if anybody remembers it. I was teaching grade 8, and my students wanted, for Christmas, they wanted a hippo, a house hippo. And it was the whole idea that this was actually not real. It was misinformation that was created, and it was created in a way, and actually it came back, I think, in 2024 to really teach about AI and that misinformation. So I think just reiterating that fact about that fact checking and students understanding their own digital footprints and awareness, discussing how that misinformation can actually be spread through the sensational framing, looking at miscaptioned posts that so often we think that it's real, and you see it over and over and over again, that you take it as fact. And then comments, and really checking and recognizing that clickbait, and looking at how you're kind of taken down that rabbit hole of those pieces. And the really important piece of that metacognitive reflection, students really thinking about their thinking and their understanding, and discussing how misinformation can spread in so many different ways. Where did they find it? How would they cross-check? So it goes back to, we've been doing digital citizenship from the time that the internet began, and things have not changed. We want to continue to engage students in digital citizenship, digital awareness, so that whether it be AI, whether it be social media, looking at deep fakes, things like that, that they learn to recognize where the fact can be passed through that fiction piece.
Absolutely. We've got about 2 more minutes now before we jump into our last question. So I'll pose this question and then either Somayeh or Keri, you can provide a response for us. So a large part of my concerns around AI are environmental, especially when it comes to leaving a world for future generations. Are there any conversations or strategies you suggest for discussing this aspect with kids who will grow up in an AI use so normalized?
I can start, or do you want to, Somayeh, do you want to start?
You can go ahead.
Okay. This is something that is very contentious, always very contentious. I've presented around the world now about AI, and we're looking at the impact that it has on use of water, use of environmental concerns with heating, things like that. And I think what it comes down to is we look at for every single post that you have or every single iteration that you have with AI, they equate it to the equivalent of pouring a water bottle out. But thinking about a text that you send, it's the same thing. An email that you send is actually 3 water bottles. So being meaningful, so often we'll send an email or a text back and forth really quickly with a friend or a family member. That's no different than an iteration of AI. So thinking about it from a grander scale, I know that we have hopes to tackle this problem. There are a lot of AI design tools out there that are really thinking about their environmental impact. A lot of companies are trying to pull back to ensure that the way that they're designing from an ethical stance is reducing both costs and environmental impacts by about 65 to 70% of what is was seen sort of in 2020, for instance, or 2021. But really looking at that mimicking of social thinking or human thinking. Why are we using it? And being really, really purposeful for its use. The deeper, if we're talking generative AI, the deeper and more contextualized that you can prompt the AI to begin with really takes away from the need to have meaningless back and forth conversations. I know my daughter, for instance, was using ChatGPT like it was Google, asking questions and things like that. Was take pictures of what's in our fridge and say, create a meal for five of the ingredients for a meal. Very smart in doing so. But really, can we be using AI in better suited ways that are not being used so superficially? Okay, so I think the environmental impact is huge. It is very central to using any type of media in that respect and any type of technology. And it's how we're using it and the meaningfulness that we're using it that needs to be at the forefront of our thinking.
Thank you, Keri. All right, we have time for one more question here, and I'll give it over to Somayeh. So our question is, with all of the fear and concern surrounding AI, what is something we should be excited about?
Okay, we talked a lot about our concerns, and there are some concerns, but there is a real hope, and there are something is exciting about AI. For example, personalized learning. They help us for adjust lessons, for example, for each child's levels and pace, and also we can use AI for support children with special needs, for example, speech tools, reading supports, and accessibility features, and it actually help them for making learning more inclusive. And also, it helps people access to knowledge and students everywhere in the world. Actually, it helps all people with in each time and each location, and also it helps us for. We talked a lot about our concerns for creativity, but if we use it, we can use it as a creativity tools. All kids can write stories or compose music. Design and use it as a learning tools for learning code. As I mentioned, actually, the future of AI is not replacing humans. It's about expanding human potentials, but it depends on it's up to us how we want to use it. I guess there are a lot of real hope behind that.
Keri, we've got about 2 minutes left if you'd like to add anything to our last question there.
I think I've heard Tom Jenkins of OpenText describe AI as you have people moving from pitchforks to fireworks and fireworks to pitchforks when you're thinking about AI. And I think in terms of efficiency, really the productivity, that's where when we're looking at offloading, where the cognitive load is back on us, where we could diminish those little tasks. So instead of having to do your laundry and having to put away the dishes and everything like that, you could really focus on those clear, deep thinking tasks. There's so many opportunities. I know that, for instance, in the healthcare world, them being able to find cures faster because they're able to circulate through thousands of chemicals and chemical reactions and things to create drugs that would help. I know that in generating content, it allows for the direction of that. So there's so many incredible opportunities. And being able to, if you think about generation after generation, each generation is very different. Being able to start from kindergarten and even pre-K and designing this type of critical thinking, that how smart our children will be in the future, 20 years from now, will be amazing. And those opportunities are really exciting. So as much as we talk about the harms, it's so that we are cognizant of where we're going to be building the future for tomorrow.
Thank you so much. So I'm afraid that's all the time that we have for today. Thank you for submitting questions, and I'm sorry that we couldn't get to all of them, but hopefully we covered quite an array here today. Somayeh and Keri, thank you so much for participating. It was great to hear your perspectives and to gain a little bit of that expertise today through our webinar.